Ashley, I really didn't. I really think I did that. I didn't mean to hurt him.
Picture a child's laughter, pure, uninhibited joy. The kind of sound that melts your heart and makes you believe in the goodness of the world. Now imagine that laughter silenced forever, snuffed out in an instant, replaced by the chilling echo of a life stolen. This is Austin Smith, a bright-eyed, 2-year-old boy with an infectious giggle and a love for life. But Austin's story isn't one of childhood innocence and carefree days. It's a story that plunges into the darkest corners of humanity, a story that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about trust, responsibility, and the sanctity of life. Springville, New York. A small town where life moves at a slower pace, where neighbors know each other by name, and where the biggest worry on most days is what to make for dinner. But on March 19, 2013, the tranquility of this close-knit community was shattered, ripped apart by an act of unspeakable violence. Behind the closed doors of a seemingly ordinary house on Cochrane Avenue, a nightmare was unfolding. A nightmare that would expose the fragility of childhood, the devastating consequences of unchecked rage, and the enduring scars left by a broken system. This is the story of Austin Smith, a young life tragically extinguished. It's a story of teenage parents, ill-equipped to handle the overwhelming responsibilities thrust upon them. It's a story of missed opportunities, systemic failures, and a community forever haunted by the question, could this tragedy have been prevented? Prepare to be shocked, angered, and heartbroken. This is a story that will stay with you long after the credits roll. This is the story of Austin Smith. Our story begins with 2 teenagers, Dylan Schumaker and Ashley Smith, whose lives would become tragically intertwined in a web of love, responsibility, and ultimately unimaginable violence. Dylan, a 16-year-old boy described by neighbors as quiet and reserved, had already faced more than his share of challenges in life. Born to parents struggling with their own demons, he had bounced between foster homes and relatives' couches, yearning for stability and a place to call his own. Ashley, a year older and already a mother of 2, was working long hours at the local Pizza Hut, desperately trying to provide for her young family. She had dreams of a better life, a life where her children would have the opportunities she never had. Their paths crossed in the hallways of Springville Griffith Institute, the local high school. Drawn together by a shared sense of isolation and a yearning for connection, they found solace in each other's company. Their relationship, though young and tumultuous, offered a glimmer of hope in what often felt like a bleak and unforgiving world. But behind the facade of young love, a storm was brewing. The weight of their responsibilities, the financial strain, and the challenges of raising 2 young children in a small town were taking their toll. Tensions were rising, and cracks were beginning to appear in their once unbreakable bond. On that fateful March day, Ashley left for her evening shift at Pizza Hut, entrusting Dylan with the care of her 2 sons, 2-year-old Austin and his infant brother, only a few months old. What happened next would forever change the lives of everyone involved. A seemingly ordinary evening would descend into chaos, violence, and unimaginable loss. This is where our story truly begins. The story of a day that started like any other, but ended in tragedy. The story of a young life cut short, and the ripple effects that would forever alter the landscape of a small town, and the lives of those touched by this senseless act of violence.
I can't take back what was done. I wish I could. I would give my life for Austin. I loved him a lot.
Austin Smith was completely defenseless. That's a given. But there were other dynamics at work there, including my client's inability to either control his anger or frustration, and his inexperience in babysitting.
Based on his short life now, what is to say he won't do this again?
Well, we don't know that. I think it's completely unlikely. It was a situational, circumstantial thing.
Dylan Schumaker, born on April 22, 1996, was a child who seemed to slip through the cracks. His parents, Michael Schumaker and Christine Rickard, grappled with their own personal struggles, leaving Dylan to navigate a childhood marked by instability and neglect. Records paint a picture of a troubled upbringing. Dylan's biological father, Michael, had a history of run-ins with the law, including charges of assault and domestic violence. His mother, Christine, struggled with substance abuse and mental health issues, leaving her often unable to provide the care and stability Dylan desperately needed. As a result, Dylan spent much of his childhood shuffled between foster homes, relatives' houses, and temporary placements. He yearned for a sense of belonging, a place to call home, and a family to love him unconditionally. But stability remained elusive. Dylan's behavioral issues, likely stemming from his chaotic upbringing and unmet emotional needs, led to conflicts with foster families and difficulties in school. He was labeled a troubled kid, a designation that seemed to follow him wherever he went. Despite the challenges, Dylan found solace in his younger sister Cassandra. They shared a close bond, forged in the fires of adversity. Cassandra, who lived with their maternal grandmother, provided a sense of normalcy and stability that Dylan craved. But even Cassandra couldn't shield Dylan from the harsh realities of his life. He carried the weight of his past, the scars of neglect and abandonment, and a deep-seated anger that simmered just beneath the surface. And then he met Ashley. Ashley Smith, born on July 14, 1993, was no stranger to hardship herself. Raised in a low-income household, she had witnessed firsthand the struggles of poverty and the challenges of single parenthood. She was determined to break the cycle, to create a better life for herself and her children. But life had other plans. At the age of 16, Ashley found herself pregnant with her first child. Despite the challenges, she embraced motherhood with fierce determination, working multiple jobs to make ends meet. When she met Dylan, she saw a kindred spirit, someone who understood the struggles she faced. They found comfort in each other's company, a shared refuge from the harsh realities of their lives. But their relationship was far from perfect. Marked by arguments, breakups, and reconciliations, it reflected the volatility and uncertainty that characterized their young lives. Despite the challenges, their bond deepened, and Ashley soon found herself pregnant with Dylan's child. They moved in together, sharing a small apartment with Ashley's firstborn son, Austin. It seemed like a chance for a new beginning, a chance to build the family they both craved. But beneath the surface, the pressures of parenthood, financial strain, and unresolved emotional baggage were creating a dangerous undercurrent. As Ashley continued to work long hours to support her growing family, Dylan found himself increasingly responsible for the care of her two young sons. He was a teenager thrust into the role of a father, ill-prepared for the demands and challenges of parenthood. The stage was set for a tragedy that would expose the fragility of young lives, the devastating consequences of unchecked anger, and the urgent need for a system that supports struggling families before it's too late. But on that fateful March day, no one could have predicted the horrors that would unfold within the walls of that seemingly ordinary house on Cochrane Avenue. The clock was ticking, and a young life hung precariously in the balance. Narrator, March 19, 2013, dawned like any other day in Springville. The sun rose, birds chirped, and the residents of Cochrane Avenue went about their daily routines. But within the walls of number 17, a storm was brewing, a storm that would soon erupt with devastating consequences. Ashley Smith, exhausted from working the late shift at Pizza Hut, kissed her two sons goodbye and headed out the door. She left Dylan Schumaker, her 16-year-old boyfriend and the father of her youngest child, in charge of 2-year-old Austin and his infant brother, just a few months old. Ashley had no reason to suspect that this day would be any different from the countless others she had entrusted Dylan with the care of her children. She had no way of knowing that this seemingly ordinary Tuesday would become etched in her memory as the day her world shattered. Dylan, a teenager thrust into the role of a parent, found himself alone with two young children, their needs and demands overwhelming his limited capacity to cope. The infant's cries were incessant, his hunger insatiable. Austin, a typical 2-year-old, was a whirlwind of energy, demanding attention and testing boundaries. The morning wore on, each hour an eternity. Dylan's patience wore thin as the children's cries grew louder and more insistent. He felt trapped, overwhelmed, and utterly alone. He tried to quiet Austin, to reason with him, but the toddler's cries only intensified. Dylan's temper, always simmering just beneath the surface, began to boil over. In a moment of fury fueled by exhaustion, frustration, and years of pent-up anger, Dylan lashed out. The details of what happened next are shrouded in the conflicting accounts of a teenage boy struggling to come to terms with the horrific consequences of his actions. But one thing is certain, in that moment, violence erupted, and a young life was forever changed. What began as a seemingly ordinary day had taken a sinister turn. The idyllic facade of Cochrane Avenue had been shattered, revealing the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of even the most peaceful communities. But as the clock ticked on, and the hours stretched into an agonizing afternoon, the worst was yet to come. What drove Dylan Schumaker to commit such a horrific act? Was it a momentary lapse in judgment, a tragic accident, or something far more sinister? The answers lie buried in the complex web of circumstances that led to this fateful day, a web we will begin to unravel in the scenes to come. Hours crawl by. The house on Cochrane Avenue remains silent, a tomb hiding a terrible secret. Outside, the world continues, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding within. But inside, time has stopped, frozen in a moment of violence and despair. Then, at 8:20 p.m., a desperate plea for help shatters the stillness. A call that will send shockwaves through the community and expose the horrifying truth of what transpired within those walls. A young man's voice, trembling with fear and panic, fills the line. It's Dylan Schumaker, his words tumbling over each other in a desperate attempt to explain the unexplainable. He reports an unresponsive child, a toddler who isn't breathing. His voice cracks as he struggles to provide coherent answers to the dispatcher's questions. He claims the child fell, hit his head, but his words lack conviction, his tone betraying a deeper, more disturbing truth. The dispatcher, recognizing the urgency of the situation, dispatches an ambulance to 17 Cochrane Avenue. Every second counts, but it's a race against time that may already be lost. Paramedics arrive on the scene, rushing into the house with their life-saving equipment. They find Dylan Schumaker, distraught and disheveled, standing over the lifeless body of a young boy. They work feverishly, attempting to revive the child, but their efforts are in vain. Austin Smith, just 2 years old, is pronounced dead at the scene. The house on Cochrane Avenue, once a symbol of hope and new beginnings, is now a crime scene. The idyllic facade of Springville has been shattered, replaced by the harsh reality of violence and loss. But as the investigation begins, and the truth of what happened inside that house starts to emerge, one question looms large: how could this have happened? Was this a tragic accident, as Dylan Schumaker initially claimed, or was there something more sinister at play? The answers lie hidden in the hours leading up to that fateful 911 call, hours we will explore in the scenes to come. I know this was a heavy one, but these stories need to be told. If you're feeling it, give this video a thumbs up and share it to spread awareness. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our true crime community. For those of you who've been here a while, you know I appreciate you. Thanks for sticking around.
Baby killer, and we thought we had a good case. Clearly, if a child or any human being is suffering multiple injuries over a period of time, that conduct is not accidental.
The yellow tape goes up, marking the boundary between the ordinary and the horrific. Experienced detectives, hardened by years on the force, step into the house, their eyes scanning every detail, every clue that might help them piece together the puzzle of Austin Smith's death. The scene inside tells a story of chaos and violence. Toys are scattered across the floor, some broken, others lying abandoned as if in mid-play. A half-eaten meal sits on the kitchen table, a silent testament to a life interrupted. But it's in the upstairs bedroom where the true horror of the scene is revealed. The air is thick with a palpable sense of violence, a lingering echo of the struggle that took place here. The forensic team meticulously documents every detail, every piece of evidence that might shed light on the events that led to Austin's death. They collect hair fibers, DNA samples, and fingerprints, building a forensic map of the crime scene. Meanwhile, at the Erie County Medical Center, Dr. Diane Vertis, a seasoned forensic pathologist, begins the grim task of conducting Austin's autopsy. Her examination will reveal the brutal truth of what this young boy endured in his final moments. Dr. Vertis' findings are chilling. Austin's small body bears the marks of multiple blunt force traumas. His skull is fractured, his brain swollen. There are bruises and abrasions on his face, chest, and limbs, evidence of a violent and sustained assault. The autopsy report paints a grim picture. Austin's injuries are consistent with being punched, kicked, and slammed against a hard surface. The force of the blows was so severe that it caused fatal brain damage. The medical examiner's conclusion is chilling: homicide. Austin Smith's death was no accident. he was murdered. The investigation is just beginning, but the evidence is mounting. The picture that emerges is one of unimaginable violence, a young life brutally extinguished. But who is responsible for this heinous crime? And what led them to commit such an act of unspeakable cruelty? The answers, it seems, lie with the young man who made that frantic 911 call. The man who was entrusted with the care of Austin Smith. The man who now finds himself at the center of a murder investigation. Dylan Schumaker, just 16 years old, sits alone in the interrogation room. The weight of his actions, the enormity of the tragedy he has caused, presses down on him with the force of 1,000 pounds. He's exhausted, terrified, and utterly alone. Erie County Sheriff's detectives Dennis Rankin and Scott Jocelyn, seasoned investigators with years of experience, employ a delicate balance of empathy and pressure. They understand the fragility of the young man before them, but they also know the importance of uncovering the truth. At first, Dylan sticks to his story, a tragic accident, a fall, a bump on the head. But the detectives, armed with the evidence from the crime scene and the autopsy report, know he's not telling the whole truth. As the hours wear on, the weight of his lies becomes unbearable. Dylan's carefully constructed facade crumbles, and the truth begins to spill out in a torrent of guilt, fear, and remorse. He confesses. He describes losing his temper, hitting Austin repeatedly, and trying to muffle his cries with a pillow. He recounts the horrifying moments after the assault, the realization that Austin wasn't breathing, the frantic attempts to revive him. His words paint a picture of a young man overwhelmed by responsibility, driven to violence by a combination of exhaustion, frustration, and a deep-seated anger that he never learned to control. He describes the events leading up to the assault, Austin's incessant crying, the baby's fussiness, his own feelings of inadequacy and helplessness. He talks about the moment he snapped, the rage that consumed him, the violence that followed. Dylan's confession is a chilling reminder of the fragility of human life, the destructive power of unchecked anger, and the devastating consequences of child abuse. But Dylan's confession is just the beginning. The investigation is far from over. There are still questions to be answered, loose ends to be tied up, and as the legal process unfolds, the community of Springville will be forced to confront the uncomfortable truths that this case has exposed. What will become of Dylan Schumaker? Will he be tried as an adult? What sentence will he receive? And what about Ashley Smith, the mother who lost her son? How will she cope with the unimaginable pain and grief of this tragedy? The answers to these questions, and many more, will be revealed in the scenes to come. But one thing is certain: the case of Austin Smith will forever be etched in the annals of true crime, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk within seemingly ordinary lives. The trial of Dylan Schumaker, a 16-year-old boy accused of murdering a 2-year-old child, becomes a media spectacle. Cameras swarm the courthouse steps, reporters jostle for position, and the nation watches, captivated by the unfolding drama. District Attorney Frank Sedita a seasoned prosecutor known for his relentless pursuit of justice, leads the charge against Dylan. He meticulously lays out the evidence, painting a chilling picture of a violent and senseless crime. Sedita argues that Dylan's actions were not those of a panicked teenager overwhelmed by circumstance, but rather a deliberate and malicious act of violence. He emphasizes the severity of Austin's injuries, the brutality of the assault, and Dylan's attempts to cover up his crime. The defense, led by attorney Joseph Terranova, mounts a vigorous defense. They portray Dylan as a troubled but ultimately harmless teenager, a victim of his own difficult upbringing. Terranova argues that Dylan's actions were not premeditated, but rather a tragic consequence of his immaturity and inability to cope with the stress of childcare. He paints a picture of a young man who made a terrible mistake, but who does not deserve to spend the rest of his life behind bars. The trial drags on for days, each witness, each piece of evidence adding another layer to the complex narrative. The jury hears from medical experts, forensic specialists, and character witnesses, each offering their own perspective on the events that led to Austin's death. As the trial draws to a close, the jury is faced with a difficult decision. Must they weigh the evidence, consider the arguments, and determine the fate of a young man whose life hangs in the balance? Hours turn into days as the jury grapples with the complexities of the case. They review the evidence, debate the legal arguments, and wrestle with their own personal biases and beliefs. Finally, after days of deliberation, the jury emerges from their isolation. The courtroom falls silent as the judge reads the verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. The verdict sends shockwaves through the courtroom. Ashley Smith, Austin's mother, weeps openly, her grief and anger palpable. Dylan's family sits in stunned silence, their faces etched with disbelief and despair. Dylan Schumaker, the troubled teenager who had yearned for a family and a place to belong, now faces the prospect of spending a significant portion of his life behind bars. But the story is far from over. The sentencing phase lies ahead, and with it, the question of what punishment fits this horrific crime. Will Dylan be shown leniency, given his age and troubled past, or will he face the full weight of the law? The answers to these questions and the ultimate fate of Dylan Schumaker will be revealed in the scenes to come, but one thing is certain: the case of Austin Smith has left an indelible mark on the community of Springville, a chilling reminder of the fragility of childhood and the devastating consequences of violence.
The record will show that you admitted that on July 23, 2013, in a phone call to your mother from the holding center, you stated, and I got a quote from the court reporter, "I am a 16-year-old blonde. Probably all I have to do is cry in front of the jury, and they're going to feel sorry for me." End quote.
Afterwards,
The day of reckoning has arrived. Dylan Schumaker, convicted of second-degree murder, stands before the judge, awaiting his fate. The courtroom is packed: reporters, spectators, and members of both Austin's and Dylan's families, their faces etched with a mixture of grief, anger, and anxiety. District Attorney Sedita argues for the maximum sentence, 25 years to life in prison. He emphasizes the brutality of the crime, the vulnerability of the victim, and the need to protect society from Dylan's violent tendencies. Defense attorney Terranova pleads for leniency. He reminds the judge of Dylan's youth, his troubled past, and the mitigating circumstances that led to this tragedy. He argues that Dylan is not a monster, but a young man who made a terrible mistake and deserves a chance at rehabilitation. Judge Petruska listens carefully, weighing the arguments, considering the evidence, and reflecting on the impact of this crime on the community. He acknowledges the tragedy of the situation, the loss of a young life, and the pain and suffering endured by both families. After what seems like an eternity, Judge Petruska delivers his sentence, 25 years to life in prison. Dylan Schumaker, the troubled teenager who had yearned for a family and a place to belong, is now condemned to spend his youth, and perhaps the rest of his life behind bars. Ashley Smith, Austin's mother, sits in stunned silence, her eyes filled with a mixture of grief and relief. The sentence won't bring back her son, but it offers a measure of justice, a sense that Austin's life mattered. The community of Springville is left reeling. The case of Austin Smith has exposed the dark underbelly of their idyllic town, the hidden struggles of families, and the devastating consequences of violence. The case sparks a conversation about child abuse, about the need for better support systems for struggling families, and about the importance of early intervention. Community leaders vow to learn from this tragedy, to work together to create a safer environment for all children. But even as the community rallies together, the scars of this tragedy run deep. The loss of Austin Smith will forever be felt, a reminder of the fragility of childhood and the devastating consequences of violence. The case of Dylan Schumaker and Austin Smith is a tragedy on many levels. It's a story of lost innocence, broken families, and a community forever changed. But it's also a story that raises important questions about responsibility, accountability, and the need for compassion and understanding in a world that often seems harsh and unforgiving. In the aftermath of this tragedy, we are left to grapple with these questions, to search for meaning in the midst of suffering, and to find hope in the face of despair. The story of Austin Smith is a story that will stay with us long after the credits roll, a reminder of the preciousness of life and the importance of protecting the most vulnerable among us. The digital age has ushered in an era of instant connectivity, where news travels at the speed of light and opinions are shared with the click of a button. The case of Dylan Schumaker, a teenager accused of murdering a toddler, becomes a lightning rod for online discussion, debate, and outrage. Social media becomes a virtual courtroom where users weigh the evidence, pronounce judgment, and demand accountability. The case sparks a national conversation about child abuse, parental responsibility, and the failures of the social services system. But as the online conversation intensifies, a darker side emerges. The anonymity of the internet emboldens some to cross the line from reasoned debate to personal attacks and hateful rhetoric. Dylan is labeled a monster, a sociopath, a danger to society. His family is vilified, accused of neglect and complicity in the crime. Even Ashley Smith, Austin's grieving mother, is not immune to the online vitriol, with some questioning her judgment and blaming her for leaving her children in Dylan's care. The case of Dylan Schumaker raises important questions about the ethics of true crime coverage in the digital age. Where do we draw the line between public interest and personal privacy? How do we balance the need for justice with the right to a fair trial? And how do we protect vulnerable individuals from the online mob mentality? The case also highlights the challenges of navigating the complex world of online information. Misinformation, rumors, and conspiracy theories spread like wildfire, blurring the lines between fact and fiction. The social media firestorm surrounding the case of Dylan Schumaker serves as a cautionary tale, a reminder of the power and peril of online platforms. It's a reminder that while social media can be a powerful tool for raising awareness and demanding justice, it can also be a breeding ground for hate, misinformation, and cyberbullying. As we move forward, it's crucial to remember the importance of critical thinking, responsible online behavior, and empathy. We must strive to create a digital space where justice is pursued, but not at the expense of compassion, fairness, and the presumption of innocence. The case of Dylan Schumaker is a tragedy for all involved, but it's also an opportunity to learn, to grow, and to create a more just and compassionate online world. A world where the pursuit of truth and accountability is balanced with the need for empathy, understanding, and respect for the dignity of all individuals. The tragic case of Austin Smith serves as a stark reminder of a pervasive issue plaguing our society: child abuse. While the circumstances surrounding Austin's death are unique, the underlying factors that contributed to this tragedy are, sadly, all too common. Experts in the field of child welfare point to a complex interplay of factors that contribute to child abuse. Stress, poverty, lack of social support, substance abuse, and mental health issues can all increase the risk of abuse. Often, those who abuse children were themselves victims of abuse. They may lack the parenting skills and emotional regulation necessary to provide a safe and nurturing environment for their children. In Dylan Schumaker's case, we see evidence of many of these risk factors. His own childhood was marked by instability, neglect, and exposure to violence. He lacked a strong support system and the necessary coping skills to handle the stress of caring for two young children. It's important to remember that Dylan's history does not excuse his actions. He is responsible for his choices and must face the consequences. However, understanding the underlying factors that contributed to his behavior is crucial in preventing future tragedies. By addressing these root causes, by providing support to struggling families, and by educating ourselves about the signs and symptoms of child abuse, we can create a safer world for children. Prevention is key. Early intervention programs, parent education classes, and accessible mental health services can make a significant difference in breaking the cycle of abuse and ensuring that all children have the opportunity to reach their full potential. The case of Austin Smith is a tragedy, but it can also be a catalyst for change. By understanding the psychology of child abuse, by recognizing the risk factors, and by taking action to support families and protect children, we can create a future where every child is safe, loved, and nurtured. But how can we, as individuals and as a society, contribute to this effort? What resources are available to those who need help? And how can we ensure that the lessons learned from Austin's tragic death are not forgotten? In the wake of a tragedy like Austin Smith's death, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by despair and helplessness. But it's crucial to remember that we are not alone. There is hope and there is help available. For families facing challenges, whether it's financial stress, relationship difficulties, or the overwhelming demands of parenting, there are resources available to help. Support groups, counseling services, and community outreach programs can provide a lifeline for those who feel like they're drowning. For those who may be at risk of harming a child, there are resources to help them manage their anger, develop coping skills, and find healthy ways to express their emotions. Anger management classes, mental health counseling, and substance abuse treatment programs can provide the support and guidance needed to prevent tragedy. It's important to remember that seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. Reaching out for support is the first step towards creating a safer and healthier environment for yourself and your children. We can all play a role in preventing child abuse. By being aware of the signs and symptoms, by offering support to struggling families, and by speaking up when we see something concerning, we can make a difference. Remember, you don't have to be an expert to help. Sometimes, just listening, offering a kind word, or connecting someone with resources can make all the difference. Here are some resources that can provide support and guidance to families and individuals in need. The National Child Abuse Hotline, 1-800-4-A-CHILD, 1-800-042-24453. Child Help USA, 1-800-042-24453. The National Parent Helpline, 1-855-4-A-PARENT, 1-855-542-72736. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-SAFE, 7233. The Rape, Abuse Incest National Network, RAIN, 1-800-656-HOPE. You can also get help online at RAIN's website, teps://web.rain.org. These hotlines and organizations offer confidential support, crisis intervention, and information about local resources. They can connect you with trained professionals who can provide guidance and assistance. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by the complexity of child abuse, but it's important to remember that every action, no matter how small, can make a difference. By reaching out, offering support, and raising awareness, we can create a world where all children are safe, loved, and protected. The case of Austin Smith is a tragedy, but it's also a call to action. Let us honor his memory by working together to prevent future tragedies and ensure that all children have the opportunity to thrive. But what about the long-term impact of child abuse? How does it affect survivors as they grow into adulthood? And what can we do to support them on their journey to healing and recovery? In the aftermath of tragedy, it's easy to get lost in the details of the crime, the investigation, and the legal proceedings. But it's important to remember the heart of this story, Austin Smith, a little boy whose life was tragically cut short. Austin was more than just a victim. He was a son, a brother, a grandson, a friend. He was a little boy who loved to sing and dance, who had a contagious laugh, and who brought joy to everyone who knew him. He loved dinosaurs, superheroes, and spending time outdoors. He was fascinated by bugs and animals, and he had a boundless curiosity about the world around him. Austin's life may have been short, but his impact on those who loved him will last forever. He will be remembered for his infectious laugh, his playful spirit, and the joy he brought to their lives. His memory will live on in the hearts of his family and friends, who will cherish the time they had with him and strive to honor his legacy by creating a world where all children are safe and loved. Though Austin is no longer with us, his spirit lives on in the laughter of children, the warmth of a loving embrace, and the hope for a brighter future. Austin's story is a reminder that every child is precious, every life is valuable, and every act of violence leaves a lasting impact. But it's also a reminder that even in the darkest of times, love, hope, and remembrance can shine through. As we move forward, let us carry Austin's memory with us, a reminder to cherish the children in our lives, to protect them from harm, and to create a world where their laughter can ring out freely and without fear. But the story doesn't end here. The case of Austin Smith has left a lasting impact on the community of Springville, raising important questions about responsibility, justice, and the prevention of future tragedies. What lessons can we learn from this case? And how can we work together to ensure that no other child suffers the same fate? The story of Austin Smith is a tragedy, a heartbreaking reminder of the fragility of childhood and the devastating consequences of violence. But it's also a story that can inspire us to create a better world for all children. Austin's death was not in vain. His story has sparked a national conversation about child abuse, prompting communities to take action to protect children and support families. We must all be vigilant, aware of the signs of abuse, and willing to speak up when we see something concerning. We must support families who are struggling, offer a helping hand, and create a culture of prevention. Every child deserves to grow up in a safe, loving, and nurturing environment. It's our collective responsibility to ensure that no child suffers the same fate as Austin. The case of Austin Smith is a call to action. It's a call to be more aware, more compassionate, and more proactive in protecting the most vulnerable members of our society. Together, we can make a difference. By raising awareness, supporting families, and taking action to prevent abuse, we can create a world where every child is safe, loved, and free to reach their full potential. The case of Austin Smith is a tragedy, but it's also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Even in the face of unimaginable loss, we can find hope, strength, and a renewed commitment to creating a better future for all children. Let us honor Austin's memory by working together to build a world where every child is safe, loved, and free to dream big dreams. Thank you for watching. Please share this video, subscribe to our channel, like this video, and leave a comment below. Together, we can make a difference. Remember, every child deserves a chance to live a happy, healthy, and fulfilling life. Let's work together to make that a reality for all children.